He was a simple herdsman, living a quiet life in the hills, until the day a blood-soaked messenger collapsed at his feet and brought him a nightmare. An unstoppable army from the east had descended, a whirlwind of destruction that shattered kingdoms and enslaved entire cities. They showed no mercy. They left no one behind. And in the midst of that chaos, they took someone he loved. His own flesh and blood, his nephew, was gone, dragged into slavery. So this herdsman made a choice that defied all reason. He would pursue them. With just 318 men, he would challenge the most powerful military force on earth. It was a suicide mission, a confrontation that would be over in minutes. But he had a plan, a desperate, dangerous, and divinely inspired plan that would unfold under the cover of darkness. This is the story the Bible barely sketches, but the book of Jasher reveals the shocking, full picture. This is the true story of the First Holy War, and the one man who stood against 4 empires. The Jordan Valley was a paradise, lush, well-watered, and rich beyond measure. Here, 5 cities flourished: Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, also known as Zoar. For 12 years they had lived under a shadow, the shadow of a powerful Eastern emperor. His name was Chedorlaomer, king of Elam. He was one of the most powerful princes in the host of Nimrod himself. But after the disaster at Babel, he struck out on his own, carving a kingdom of fear. The 5 cities of the plain served him, paying a heavy annual tax for over a decade. But in the 13th year, their patience snapped. Fueled by wealth and pride, they rebelled. They tore up their treaties and declared their independence. They would bow to Chedorlaomer no longer. When the news reached Chedorlaomer, his anger was not a hot rage, but a cold, patient wrath. He would not just punish them, he would utterly annihilate them. But he would not go alone. He sent messengers to his allies, forging a covenant of destruction. He called upon Arioch of Elasar and Tidal of Goyim, and Jasher reveals a stunning hidden detail. The 4th king was none other than Nimrod himself. The once proud emperor of Babel had been so humbled in a previous war with Chedorlaomer that he was now a subject king, forced to fight under his command. This confederacy of terror assembled an army of 800,000 men, a force so vast the earth shook under their march. Their goal was simple: total war. But they didn't head straight for Sodom. First, they swept through the lands of Canaan, destroying any potential allies. They smashed the mighty Rephaim in Ashtaroth, the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in the plain of Kiriathaim. They were a whirlwind, leaving a path of desolation. They then turned to the Horites in Mount Seir, driving them back to the wilderness of Paran. Finally, they swung back, and on the western edge of the desert, they encountered the Amalekites and the Amorites, crushing them utterly. The message was clear: resistance is death. The 5 kings of the plain knew the storm was coming. They assembled their forces and marched out to meet the invaders in the valley of Siddim. But their army was one of merchants and shepherds, not hardened warriors. They were confident in their numbers, but blind to their weakness. The battle was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The lines of Sodom and Gomorrah shattered on the first charge. The kings saw their forces being cut to pieces. In a panic, they did the only thing they could do. They fled. but the valley was full of hidden lime pits and tar pits. As they fled in blind terror, the kings themselves tumbled into these traps. Their chariots were bogged down, their horses trapped. Those who survived abandoned their kings and fled to the mountains, leaving their cities, their wealth, and their people utterly defenseless. Chedorlaomer's victory was complete. He marched into the cities of the plain, sacked them, and took all their goods and all their food. And he took captives. The entire population was rounded up and forced to march east, back to the lands of their conquerors. And among the countless prisoners was one man, a man who had chosen to live in Sodom for its pastures, Abram's nephew, Lot. Meanwhile, in the plains of Mamre, Abram dwelt in peace. He was now a powerful chieftain in his own right, allied with the Amorite brothers Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. One day, a lone survivor, a fugitive, stumbled into his camp. He was haggard, half dead, and bore a horrifying tale. He told Abram of the great battle, the collapse of the armies, the fall of the kings, and the utter destruction and captivity of the cities. And then he delivered the personal blow. "They have taken your nephew Lot. He and all he owned are gone, marching to slavery in the east." Abram did not panic. He did not despair. He turned to his God, and Jasher tells us he made a vow. He swore by the Lord, the possessor of heaven and earth, that he would rescue his brother's son from the hands of the invaders. He immediately mobilized his own force. He had 318 men, born in his own household, trained and fiercely loyal. But this wasn't just a family militia. His Amorite allies, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, joined him with their own fighting men. This small, elite force was all that stood against the might of 4 eastern kings. They set out immediately, moving with the speed that the heavy, loot-laden army of Chedorlaomer could never match. They tracked them north, following the devastation like a trail of breadcrumbs. Abram pursued them for hundreds of miles, finally finding them camped in a valley near Dan. The Eastern army was confident, secure in their victory. They were feasting, drinking, and sleeping off their celebrations. They had not posted a vigilant watch. Why would they? They had annihilated every army in the land. Abram saw his chance. He would not meet them in a pitched battle. That was suicide. Instead, he devised a brilliant, daring strategy. Under the cover of darkness, he split his small force into multiple companies. They would launch a coordinated surprise attack from different sides, creating chaos and the illusion of a much larger army. In the dead of night, the silence was shattered. Abram and his men fell upon the camp like the wrath of God. The Elamite army woke to terror and confusion. In the darkness, they couldn't tell friend from foe. They heard war cries from every direction. Panic spread like wildfire. Jasher says the Spirit of God was with Abram that night. He fought with a superhuman strength and focus. His goal was not to kill every soldier, but to break their will and reach the captives. He and his men cut a path straight through the heart of the camp. They found the prisoners, terrified and bound, guarded by a few startled sentries who were quickly overwhelmed. Abram found Lot, pulled him to his feet, and commanded his men to get every single captive moving. This was a rescue mission, not a war of attrition. The Confederate kings, including Chedorlaomer and Nimrod, realizing their camp was overrun and believing a massive army was upon, mounted their horses and fled for their lives. Their mighty army, once 800,000 strong, dissolved into a mob of terrified fugitives. But Abram was not finished. He harried them, driving them north, ensuring they would not regroup and counterattack. He pursued them relentlessly, all the way to Hobah, which is north of Damascus, smiting the stragglers and securing a complete victory. Abram returned not as a simple herdsman, but as a conquering hero. He brought back all the goods, all the people, and all the wealth of Sodom and Gomorrah that had been taken. The news of his impossible victory spread like wildfire. The king of Sodom, who had escaped the tar pits, came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, the king's valley. He was humbled and effusive with his thanks. But then another king arrived, a king of a different sort. Adonizedek, king of Salem, who Jasher reveals was none other than Shem, the son of Noah. This righteous, ancient patriarch came to bless the man who had acted with the courage of God. In an act of profound humility and recognition, Abram gave a tenth, a tithe, of all the spoils to Shem. This was an acknowledgement that his victory came not from his own strength, but from the God whom Shem served. Then the king of Sodom made his offer. "Give me the people," he said, "and take the goods for yourself." It was a king's ransom. But Abram's reply has echoed through history. "I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, 'I have made Abram rich.'" He would not let any man claim credit for the blessings God had given him. He took nothing for himself, only what his young men had eaten and the portion due to his Amorite allies. That night, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great." This is the true story of the War of the Kings. It's not just a tale of a battle, but a revelation of a man's character. It shows us that true power lies not in the size of your army, but in the strength of your faith, the loyalty you inspire, the integrity you hold, and the God you serve. Abram returned the wealth of Sodom, but he secured a far greater prize, a legacy of faith that would change the world forever. Thanks for watching, and as always, like, share, subscribe, and click on the notification button as we dive more deeper into more hidden stories you don't find in the Bible.